tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
It's not just Canadian families we're standing up for here, it's American families as well.
Canada's premiers hit Washington, D.C. to try to convince lawmakers and the president that tariffs will hurt everyone, while BC business leaders sound alarms.
And laying out scenarios for potential layoffs.
Plus,
I couldn't sleep properly for the last 2 days. It's very unfortunate.
as investigators look into what led police to shoot and kill a teenage boy in Surrey, members of the community mourn the 15-year-old victim.
This is a situation that no one wanted to be part of.
And
we can't take our water for granted anymore.
BC's snowpack is well below normal, raising concerns about the environment and our water security.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. Canadian premiers are gearing up for a day of trade talks with U.S. lawmakers on both sides of the island, Washington, D.C. The push comes amid Donald Trump's threats to impose tariffs on Canadian goods, from steel and aluminum to much more. The CBC's Katie DeRosa reports.
I wanted to get something for President Trump from the duty-free before I left, so we'll have to keep this short.
Premier David Eby and all of his fellow premiers are on a charm offensive in Washington, D.C. It's unclear if they'll secure a face-to-face meeting with Donald Trump or his key advisors. But they do plan to meet with Republican and Democratic lawmakers, as well as business leaders, to try and warn them of the disastrous consequences of tariffs on both sides of the border. So far, that message has not been enough to stave off tariffs on all steel and aluminum entering the U.S., set to begin March 12th. Broader tariffs could begin even earlier on March 4th.
This trip is about sending the message that it's not just Canadian families we're standing up for here, it's American families as well. These tariffs, even just the tariffs announced today, are going to increase the cost of so many things for Americans, everything from cars to airplanes, and it doesn't have to be this way.
Canadian politicians have a few weeks to argue for exemptions. Still, the head of BC's Trade and Economic Security Task Force says the uncertainty is already hurting businesses.
We've been hearing from our over 5,000 members. Many of them are already reducing orders, seeing costs increase, and laying out scenarios for potential layoffs.
Canada's Minister for Internal Trade says the tariff threats have created a unified push to break down interprovincial trade barriers. They want to make it easier for goods, services, and skilled workers like doctors and nurses to move more easily across the country.
There is palpable momentum and enthusiasm from each and every jurisdiction to eliminate these barriers to trade so that we can add $200 billion to the Canadian economy without going through Donald Trump.
The Trump administration slapped tariffs on steel and aluminum in 2018, but later dropped them after Canada imposed tariffs of its own. Canada has held off on retaliatory measures so far, and with the premiers in Washington, the hope is that their diplomacy can stave off a trade war. Katie DeRosa, CBC News, Victoria.
City councillors in Vancouver, meanwhile, are unified in their response to U.S. tariff threats. They've passed a motion to promote buying local, among other things. But as Chad Pawson explains, it also seeks to supercharge the city's economic resilience.
Expanding sort of things like patio.
Ken Sim and Pete Fry, political rivals at the city of Vancouver, on stage together, united in protecting the city from U.S. tariff threats.
We are completely united on this issue, and we're working together
to tweak our strategies and be more nimble and responsive, because this does create a real sort of imperative that we have to come up with some solutions.
All those in favor say yay.
Vancouver Council voted unanimously for a plan that would promote buying local for city business, but councillors have gone further.
A lot of people are nervous right now.
Sim and Fry worked together to supercharge their motion to find ways to bolster Vancouver's economy from within, with the mayor's task force and possible ideas such as temporary fee reductions for patio permits and special event permits, property tax deferral for commercial and/or light industrial properties, split business licenses so businesses could offer more services without the extra paperwork. Council is also picking up on a challenge from the Greater Vancouver Board of Trade. That's to achieve an annual 3% growth in GDP.
We have to take this opportunity to make our economy as resilient as possible.
Greater Vancouver Board of Trade CEO Bridget Anderson applauds Vancouver, saying if it can achieve that growth, it'll add local jobs, boost government revenues, and make life more affordable. She wants other cities to follow.
And this is our opportunity to really bolster our business community within our own country, within our own cities and our own province.
Other cities in Metro Vancouver are taking action. Both Delta and Burnaby, for example, want Buy Canadian approaches. However, it's unclear how much improvement can be made. New Westminster Council has a report in front of it that shows 97% of its current vendors are already Canadian. Still, if there are actions to take, this U.S. tariff threat has lit a fire under local governments to find them. Chad Pawson, CBC News, Vancouver.
BC's police watchdog has now confirmed officers shot and killed a teenager in Surrey on Sunday. People in the area are mourning the 15-year-old. As John Hernandez shows us, investigators will look into whether the police use of force was justified.
One by one, people leave behind flowers and tears at this growing memorial in Surrey's Clayton Heights. People in this community shaken after a teenager was shot and killed after an interaction with police.
Honestly, I couldn't sleep properly for the last 2 days. It's very unfortunate.
The IIO confirmed police responded to reports of a youth with a weapon at Clayton Heights Secondary School on Sunday. Investigators wouldn't confirm what the weapon was, but CBC News reviewed footage of the incident. The minute-long video shows a person holding what appears to be a handgun to their head, while officers urge them not to harm themselves. Moments later, the person points it toward police. The IIO says police shot the teen during the interaction and he died of his injuries at the scene. Community members, students, and family friends told CBC News he was a beloved teen and described him as neurodiverse.
This is a situation that no one wanted to be part of, and the community in general just is reaching out and upholding the family with care.
The IIO is now investigating whether the use of force was justified. This policing researcher also reviewed footage of the incident and questions if the shooting could have been prevented.
We would never know if a few extra minutes of engagement with the young man as the officers were behind that vehicle might have helped to diffuse the situation.
A spokesperson from the police union said officers prioritize de-escalation but sometimes have to make difficult, split-second decisions. The union confirmed the officers involved are on leave to receive mental health support. The IIO is urging anyone who witnessed the shooting or has video of it to come forward. John Hernandez, CBC News, Surrey.
Homicide investigators say a man has now been found guilty of double murder and attempted murder after a deadly daytime shooting at a popular sports area in Surrey almost 3 years ago. Just before 3 p.m. on July 30th, 2022, gunfire erupted at the South Surrey Athletic Park. Jordan Krishna and Robin Sereni were killed, while Harbir Kosa was treated for life-threatening injuries. The shooting was believed to be targeted. Days later, police arrested a suspect. iHit says this Monday, a jury found Bryce Dallas Campbell guilty of 2 counts of second-degree murder and attempted murder. He'll be sentenced at a later date. iHit says the killings happened in a place where young athletes and their families expected to feel safe. Prosecutors have finished their closing arguments in a murder trial after the gruesome killing of a popular Kitsilano Park caretaker 3 years ago. Brent White has pleaded not guilty to second-degree murder in the death of 77-year-old Justice Daniel in 2021. A warning, this story does contain graphic details. The CBC's Karen Larson was at BC Supreme Court in Vancouver.
Dan, Justice Daniel was a popular figure in his Kitsilano neighborhood. By all accounts, a warm and social person, well-liked, and the on-site caretaker at Tatlow Park, living in the cottage there. But in December of 2021, Daniel was found dead inside that cottage in what was a very gruesome crime scene. 3 months later, Brent White was arrested and charged with second-degree murder in the killing, as you said. He's pleaded not guilty. Forensic testing found traces of Daniel's blood on sandals and a knife found in the white van that White was living in at the time of the arrest. And evidence heard at this trial is that Daniel was stabbed 42 times and also suffered blunt force injury to his head.
And Karen, what are Crown and defense saying about what they think happened?
Well, White's defense is not saying he didn't commit the homicide. The argument they're making is that he did it in self-defense, that Daniel attacked him. Now, according to the evidence we've heard, the two men did know each other. White testified they were in Daniel's home in that Tatlow Park cottage. Watching CNN when the altercation began, White claimed that Daniel suddenly became violent and attacked him with a knife while claiming to be Ilbis, which is an Islamic figure similar to the devil. Crown is saying that the length and sheer brutality of the attack on Daniel proves there was intent to murder. The prosecutor has also pointed out that White tried to cover up Daniel's body and the bloodstains, and they took the keys off Daniel's belt and locked the door and then destroyed the key to get rid of the evidence. The issue of whether there was intent in this killing is very important. Intent must be proven for a conviction on second-degree murder charges. Dan?
BC health officials say the number of people visiting hospitals because of severe flu symptoms this season has dropped dramatically. They say that's because this year's vaccine appears to be particularly effective against both types of influenza viruses which are circulating. But the latest data shows that might soon change.
So through the second half of the season, we may actually see vaccine effectiveness come down, not because of waning, but because of emergence of these variants that we are watching very closely.
The BC CDC shares its findings every February with the World Health Organization, which then uses the information to design next season's vaccine. Darius Madavi is here with our look at the weather, and it's staying cold and clear for now.
Yes, that's right. Some change on the way for the weekend. We're going to return to that wet, warmer Vancouver classic South Coast weather, winter weather. But for now, still very cold. Arctic outflow warning still in place for the Sea to Sky, Whistler, and Pemberton. Extreme cold warning over in the around the Rockies for the Yoho Park, Kootenay Park region, as well as Elk Valley. Here, though, South Coast, not really any precipitation in sight. In fact, we had blue, clear skies for across pretty much the entirety of southern BC. As you'll see here, as we get into tomorrow afternoon, maybe some high cloud moves in, and then Thursday is looking a little bit cloudier with just the slightest chance of flurries on the way there. It's not showing up even in this model, but it is a slight possibility. And then we'll see some precipitation hitting at Washington, Oregon, and then breaking into the southern interior, but not likely to hit us here on the South Coast on Friday. And then really, again, Dan, the temperatures are the story. They're going to be coming up about a degree each day over the next couple days. And get ready for rain this weekend.
Okay, we're familiar with that. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
Nominations for this year's Juno Awards have now been announced, and there's plenty of BC representation.
Came a long way from the Ville, damn right.
The Indigenous hip-hop duo Snotty Nose Rez Kids is known for making music that tackles hard subjects with levity and humor. They're nominated. They released their self-titled debut album in early 2017.
They are an amazing hip-hop act out of Vancouver, out of BC, that actually performed on our show back in 2022. They're up for 3 awards this year, which again is outstanding.
BC's own Baby No Money, Peach Pit, and country singer Dallas Smith also are nominated. The award ceremony will be held on March 30th at Rogers Arena in Vancouver. Michael Bublé, the pride of Burnaby, is set to host. Still to come, a controversial housing project in Richmond gets the go-ahead, prompting backlash from some people in the community concerned about public safety. That story's next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox.
Canada's biggest night in music is coming to Vancouver, and we want you to be there. The Juno Awards will be hosted by BC's own Michael Bublé, live from Rogers Arena on Sunday, March 30th. The evening features live performances by Juno-nominated artists, including a special award presentation to rock band Sum 41. Tickets on sale now at cbcmusic.ca/Junos.
This is Vancouver is a new CBC podcast where we explore the issues, the stories, and the people that make this place home. Listen to This is Vancouver wherever you get your podcasts.
The province is moving ahead with a supportive housing project in Richmond after it previously said it needed to study alternate locations. The announcement, though, is being met with concern from some community groups. As Michelle Gassoub explains, there's concern the rollout of an already controversial project has been botched.
This now empty lot in Richmond could soon house 90 units of supportive housing, but the project has hit speed bumps.
The province has caused chaos and confusion.
BC's housing minister paused the project weeks before the fall provincial election. At the time, he said other potential sites needed to be studied, but the site at Cambie and Sexsmith now once again has a green light.
There was already, a backlash and a consternation in the community about it, and now there's even more.
That backlash is coming from groups who say other modular housing projects have affected public safety in Richmond.
We started noticing more open drug use in the neighborhood, discarded drug paraphernalia, needles, pipes, sometimes people breaking in or trespassing onto private property.
They protested the new proposed site before it was paused last year. The This development comes on the heels of Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim saying he'd halt construction of new supportive housing in that city, calling for other municipalities to step up and build their own. The province said homelessness in Richmond has increased 91% since the pandemic, with 160 people now unhoused. Writing in a statement, there has been a significant amount of misinformation about this project, and that the building will have 24/7 staffing and security features such as cameras, fencing, and lighting. Cleanup teams will help keep surroundings tidy. BC Housing will host public sessions in March to hear from the community. The proposal will then go to Richmond City Council. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Richmond.
We may have had a bunch of snow fall across most of BC recently, but the province says a drier than normal few months beforehand means our snowpack is just 72% of normal. As Michelle Gomez reports, experts say this could have serious impacts on our environment and our water security.
In Metro Vancouver, it may seem like a snowier year than normal, but province-wide, the snowpack is 28% below average. That's according to the River Forecast Centre.
That final 2 weeks of January, it just was very, very dry.
Last year saw some of the lowest snowpack levels on record in BC. This time last year, the snowpack was 39% lower than normal. But as you can see, skiers on the North Shore Mountains are enjoying much better conditions this year.
This time last year we weren't open, so very, very different. So we're really pleased.
Despite that difference, Whitehead says the base at Mount Seymour Resort is only around 75% of what it would normally be.
So there's definitely obviously a trend with warming, and we are very concerned about that. But at the moment, we're doing okay.
This watershed advocate says below average snowpacks could have serious impacts, including on fish habitats, agriculture production, and water security, not to mention wildfire risk.
We can't take our water for granted anymore.
Tull says unpredictable snowpacks are becoming the new normal. In order to maintain water supplies, she says preparation is key.
It has to be a priority across the province all year long. It can't be something that we continue to just react to when that crisis comes, whether that's a drought, whether that's a flood.
We are about 2/3 of the way through the season when snowpack forms, says the River Forecast Centre, meaning things could still change.
Fingers crossed that we can bump up a little bit, but it's unlikely that we'll even get anywhere near normal levels by April 1st.
Boyd says rain and snowfall over the next few months will determine if we end up in a drought this summer. Michelle Gomez, CBC News, Vancouver.
On the lookout over Osoyoos Lake from the Watermark Beach Resort in Osoyoos. The lake freezing up, at least in some places, with persistent cold temperatures. Lows in that area have been plunging to almost -20 overnight. But there is a change ahead. Daria says your BC-wide weather forecast coming up.
I think it's important to give a human face to the stories that we hear every day, the people that they affect. And I think talking to those people is what really gives us the true sense of the impact of the stories that we're hearing.
Back to one of our top stories now. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says Donald Trump's planned tariffs on Canadian steel and aluminum will hurt both countries.
We will be working with the American administration over the coming weeks to highlight the negative impacts on Americans and Canadians of these unacceptable tariffs.
Trudeau also highlighted the harms from the levies when he spoke with U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance at the Paris AI Summit. The Prime Minister says he will work with other leaders to coordinate a response. The U.S. tariffs are set to take effect early next month. Canada sends tons of steel and aluminum worth billions of dollars to the U.S. every year. Trudeau has not announced retaliatory measures, saying he hopes it doesn't come to that, but adds that Canada's response will be firm and clear. Ottawa, meanwhile, has named a former senior Mountie to be the federal point person on fighting the spread of fentanyl. Prime Minister Trudeau says Kevin Brosseau's role as so-called fentanyl czar will involve working closely with U.S. counterparts to accelerate Canada's efforts to disrupt the illicit trade. Brosseau served as an RCMP deputy commissioner and the senior Mountie in Manitoba. More recently, he was deputy national security and intelligence advisor to the PM. Trump has threatened tariffs on all goods from Canada, citing the illegal flow of migrants and drugs, including fentanyl. Now, after meeting U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House, Jordan's King Abdullah released a statement calling for a two-state solution in the Middle East, while pushing back against the president's plan for the U.S. to take over and redevelop Gaza. The CBC's Sasha Petrusik has more.
It's not a complex thing to do, and with the United States being in control of that piece of land, a fairly large piece of land, you can have stability in the Middle East for the first time.
U.S. President Donald Trump repeated the proposal that he has put forward to have the U.S. take over Gaza, not to buy it, not to conquer it, but just to simply take it over and to develop it with hotels and office towers and houses. And what would happen to the Palestinians who live there? Well, they would be moved to, as he put it, parcels of land in Jordan and Egypt and anywhere else where somebody wants to set up a home for them, and they would not be allowed to return. He said much of this while he was sitting next to King Abdullah, the leader of Jordan, who is in a bit of an uncomfortable position because Jordan does not want to take in millions of Palestinians. They made that clear. Egypt has said that too, and so have other Arab countries. But Trump is putting the pressure on because both of these countries, Jordan and Egypt especially, rely on U.S. help to the tune of more than $1.5 billion a year. Trump is saying, though, that this is going to happen, and in his words, will create peace in the Middle East.
All the stories you hear about the Middle East not really wanting peace, that they want war, they want this, they want to go a certain place. Let me tell you, those stories are false. They want to have peace.
Jordan's king didn't really have much of an answer to all of this. He suggested that Arab countries, and Egypt in particular, will come back with some kind of a proposal. And as far as Jordan's concerned, he said that it has to take care of its own interests.
Mr. President, I truly believe that with all the challenges that we have in the Middle East, that I finally see somebody that can take us across the finish line to bring stability, peace, and prosperity to all of us in the region.
So a lot of questions being asked, and much of it originating from the White House. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Well, just to remind you, the Family Day long weekend is coming up. And a Vancouver nonprofit wants to help families get organized and have some fun while doing it. A free pop-up with fun workshops for kids and financial coaching, literacy coaching for adults is taking place tomorrow. Now, Program Manager of Family Services of Greater Vancouver, Murray Baker, is here now to share the details. Murray, always a pleasure to see you. Appreciate you doing this.
Thanks for having me.
Why do you think families need this event right now?
Well, I think families now are in greater stress than we've seen in years, from a financial aspect, but also the ripple effect of that in terms of how it's impacting relationships and interaction among families. They really need to access support to get them through some difficult times, as we've seen.
Have you seen an uptick in people asking for help at your organization?
Absolutely. Our numbers have, in some cases, doubled. And this is in the areas, people are struggling with housing, of course. Food is a huge area. And of course, with the threat of tariffs coming up, that could be even a greater burden on families.
And particularly when it comes to, I mean, on top of all of those other pressures, financial literacy for people who are new to Canada and for those who are here, may not have a background in it. What are you hoping people take away from that? And what will they actually get to do?
Well, on Family Day, this is our second year. We had a great response last year. So this year we've added some features. We have workshops on topics such as RESPs for the parents. But then for the kids, we have a lot of different things such as origami making. We have a wish tree. We have coloring. We have dance exercises to get people active, but then also talk about emotional regulation with kids. So just fun activities that get people active. We also have a piggy bank decorating activity for the kids, along with a lesson on saving and putting your money in a piggy bank and growing it when you're a kid.
So starting from the ground up, literally.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And what about tax readiness? Because we know we're getting to that time where people are being asked to either contribute to RRSPs and other things or start to get their taxes in order.
That's right. And a lot of times, individuals, if they haven't made a lot of money during the year, they might say, well, why am I bothering filing taxes? It's more important than ever because by filing, oftentimes it makes them eligible for a lot of benefits that they wouldn't receive if they hadn't filed. And we're here to support people. We'll help people file their own taxes or through 10th Tax, we also provide free tax filing. So people can file their taxes and they can go back years. Even if they haven't filed for 5 years, they can get it filed for free.
Great. And for people who want to go to your event, remind us who, what, when, where, and why.
Okay, so it's happening tomorrow from 10 till 2 at Vancouver Public Library. Free events, and VPL will be there as they're our partner, which has been a great partnership. And bring the kids and have fun.
Great. And that's at the main branch downtown?
Main branch, yes.
All right. Just across the street.
Across the street.
Murray Baker Family Services of Greater Vancouver. We always appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Still to come, why does U.S. President Donald Trump want tariffs on steel and aluminum again? We'll take a look at what might be behind the push next. It is a massive tariff, almost 25% on all steel and aluminum. This is not a new idea from Donald Trump. He's tried it before. So what makes this time different? Andrew Chang breaks it down.
At this point, you might be thinking, boy, Trump really has it out for Canada. A new tax, a tariff on all steel and aluminum imports.
We're doing a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum.
Yes, this would affect all countries. But you know who this hits the hardest? Canada is the leading exporter of steel to the United States, responsible for about 1/5 of all U.S. steel imports, worth around $8-9 billion U.S. last year. And here's aluminum. Again, Canada is the top exporter to the U.S., and it's not even close. It sends the U.S. more aluminum every year than every other country combined. But the U.S. has tried this before.
When it comes to a time when our country can't make aluminum and steel, you almost don't have much of a country.
It slapped a tax on steel and aluminum imports in 2018 during Trump's first term. And you know what happened? The price of cars went up. All that aluminum in cans drove up the price of soft drinks and beer too. And appliances across the board, they all became more expensive. So why try this again? It's telling that the earliest praise we saw for Trump's new plan to tax foreign steel and aluminum came from American producers. The American Iron and Steel Institute, which represents steelworkers across the U.S., welcomes President Trump's continued commitment to a strong American steel industry, which is essential to America's national security and economic prosperity. Let's pick up on that last part. National security was the legal basis for putting a 25% tariff on steel back in 2018.
We need great steel makers, great aluminum makers for defense.
The idea being, just think of all the things that require steel and aluminum in the first place. Military vehicles, weapons, critical infrastructure, renewable energy. These all rely on steel and or aluminum that the U.S. can't produce enough of domestically. So it counts on the rest of the world selling it what it needs. That's maybe a dangerous spot to be in, but there was also a business case.
I don't think it ever had anything to do with making America safer. It had to do, in his mind, with making America's steel industry stronger. And he used those national emergency measures simply as a justification to impose the tariffs.
The World Steel Association has a pretty good representation of the top steel producers in the world. And that huge circle in Asia, that's China. No country produces as much steel as China. And China sells steel all over the world at artificially low prices, say critics and Trump himself.
Back in 2018, he felt that there was foreign steel and aluminum being dumped into the United States. Dumped means that they're selling it for less in the United States than they're selling it in their home market.
China's cheap steel has an impact on the price of all steel globally. And Trump would argue this hurts American producers.
The Americans don't like that. They want to keep steel prices high to support American steel producers in America. And the way to do that, they say, is to put up these tariffs on everybody, and Canada sort of gets caught in the crossfire of that.
Problem is, if Trump wants to revitalize American steel, it has a long way to go. This is what the industry looks like, courtesy of the Federal Reserve. The gray shaded columns, those are U.S. recessions. But overall, over the last 50+ years, U.S. raw steel production has cratered. The industry is no longer the production powerhouse it once was. There are lots of reasons for this.
If you look back at what the American economy was doing in the 80s and the 90s and the 70s, they were building a ton of stuff, and they needed a ton of steel to do that. And now, the economy is much more technologically based, and we're not building these giant, enormous, colossal warehouses anymore.
China is the biggest producer of steel in the world, but Canadian and U.S. steel companies really have not kept up with the technology and not made the capital investments required.
And ultimately, when Trump did impose a 25% tax on steel imports in 2018, the whole exercise just didn't last very long. Look again at all the zigs and zags of U.S. domestic steel production. We can zoom right into March 2018, when Trump's tariffs first went into effect, and we can see a small spike. Steel imports went way down during this period, by the way, and American producers did try to pick up the slack. But before even the end of the calendar year, US production started sinking again. And we started to see headlines like this, as the industry was faced with the problem that made it uncompetitive in the first place. It just costs more to make steel in the US. Otherwise, they wouldn't import it for cheaper. Demand and production fell.
As the price went up, they just couldn't bear the cost, so they started laying people off. Then they went to the White House and said, we can't continue like this. This is going to cost American jobs. The people that were most severely punished by those tariffs weren't Canadian steel producers. It was American buyers of Canadian steel.
Ultimately, Trump removed tariffs on Canadian steel, its #1 importer, by May 2019. The tariffs barely lasted a year.
The revocation of the tariffs back in 2018-19 was really a sign that this was not well conceived in the first place. Whatever he thought he was going to accomplish, it didn't get accomplished.
Fast forward to today, US steel production right now is actually lower than it was in 2017 pre-tariffs. Aluminum production, almost 10% less. Meanwhile, when you make things like steel and aluminum more expensive, lots of other things become more expensive too. It's hard to overstate just how wide-reaching the impact is when you increase the cost of a basic building block like steel or aluminum. Consider just the military applications: warships, submarines, tanks, fighter jets, guns, shells, missile casings. Or think about construction: bridges, highways, transmission towers, power lines, railways, pipelines, solar panels, wind turbines. All of these things become more expensive when steel and aluminum become more expensive. To the point where, in some cases, the US Federal Reserve Board found that any benefits of increased import protection are offset by increases in costs. And if you want to see how that math translates to reality, consider how the Peterson Institute for International Economics crunched those numbers. It figured Trump's first round of steel tariffs in 2018 would create 8,700 jobs in steel, raising revenues by $2.4 billion in 2018, but increasing costs for everyone who uses steel by about $5.6 billion. Cost per job, 650 grand. That's where you likely would have felt the pinch, with cars and trucks, construction, and appliances all becoming more expensive.
You're driving up the cost of the end product, whether that's cans of beer or appliances or cars or car parts. All of those things get more expensive as a result. And we saw that happen in 2018. We're expecting, if this goes ahead, we'll see it happen this time. It is simple economics.
So the big question right now is why? Why impose roughly the same tariffs on steel and aluminum Trump already tried to impose 7 years ago, knowing now how that story ended? Is this about applying maximum pressure on Canada?
The steel industry in Canada employs close to 25,000 people. I think it would have a devastating impact on the Canadian steel industry.
Tariffs at 25% going into one of our main markets will be devastating, and we really can't let this happen.
Or is this about revitalizing American industry?
Industrial policy plays large with a lot of America's competitors. So unless you have a long-term vision and money behind it, it's going to be difficult to turn it around.
Tariffs and trade protection are very inefficient. They create supply chain disruptions and constrain the flow of goods and services through the supply chain.
Or is this about correcting a global market?
China makes more steel than basically everybody else combined. They sell that steel at very cheap rates around the world. That drives down the price of steel for everybody else.
Whatever the answer, this is one of Trump's plans, which we've actually seen before. It's already been tried. Whether it worked is a whole other story.
Darius Madavi is here with the BC-wide weather forecast, and it's still staying a bit chilly.
Yes, I feel like we've done the same intro and almost the same weather hit for a while now.
I checked the scripts.
Yeah. I want to start by talking about the actual highs that we're feeling, then what it actually feels like. So the highs that we're seeing, measuring, versus what it feels like. So here's the highs today. Here are the highs over the next few days. You can notice those starting to climb a little bit, especially around Vancouver. Some places like further inland, the Fraser Valley, those temperatures are staying a little bit lower, which is not unusual, but they should start to come up as we hit the weekend as well, and some precipitation moves in. Things should warm up. But what is it actually feeling like over the next few days? You can see it's feeling a lot colder. And again, these are our highs. We're definitely feeling even colder than this, especially in the mornings, early in the morning in places like Vancouver, feeling like the negative double digits. That'll probably be the case again tomorrow before we start to see those wind chills decrease in intensity, so coming back up closer to zero by the time we get into the end of this week. If we zoom out to the rest of the province, we can talk about the highs everywhere else as well. You'll notice a pretty big difference into the north over the next couple days, falling once again as we get into the end of the week, whereas in the south, temperatures start to come up. We're not quite at seasonal. Seasonal for the southern interior, like Kelowna area, is a couple degrees warmer than this, but it is improvement compared to the -8s that we've been seeing over the last few days. If we take a look at our lows over the next couple days, this is including wind chill. So the white here is the actual temperature. The blue is the wind chill. You'll notice that those temperatures are also very different in the south. The temperature story is different than up in the north, where things are getting quite a lot colder over the next couple days. Feeling like, there we go, -37 later this week in Fort St. John, whereas in the south, things are looking a little bit better, especially up on the south coast, but in the southern interior as well. Things aren't nearly as bad as they have been. Feeling like -6 is the high in Kelowna at the end of this week. That's a lot better than we have seen if you're hoping for some warmer weather over the next couple days. And all that is happening because we finally have a shift. We've had this ridge of high pressure sitting over BC. That's meant strong outflow winds as that air tries to escape the high pressure and get somewhere with lower pressure, just more air to move around, more area to move around for those air molecules. So we've seen those strong outflow winds, and it's also been keeping any precipitation offshore. Just sort of, there's been this blocking pattern sitting over the province. Now, we'll start to see some snow happening up in the Peace once again tomorrow at times, maybe a few flurries, not as much as today, even though there wasn't all that much today. And then that next system, you can see it sort of being deflected off the side, just barely hitting Haida Gwaii, and some snow came into the south there. I forgot to mention that on Friday. And then we see on Saturday a bigger system that finally makes its way into the rest of the province, spreading some real snow, helping out that snowpack, and overall just changing the weather pattern that we've been seeing. Conditions across the province tomorrow, lots of sunshine still, but maybe with some snow up around the Peace, around Fort St. John. And here's a 5-day forecast. And again, one more cold, very chilly morning tomorrow, and then things start to turn around as we get maybe some flurries on Thursday also, and the real precipitation arrives this weekend.
Back to something just as familiar. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Step right up. Researchers are taking a closer look at Vancouver Island's endangered marmots using a smart scale that makes it easier to study their health. More on how they do it next. Hundreds of military personnel and veterans are competing at the Invictus Games here in Vancouver and Whistler this week. Today, skeleton athletes from around the globe will be racing in the finals at the Whistler Sliding Center, one of the world's fastest tracks.
It's the first time the Games have included adaptive winter sports, and as Janella Hamilton tells us, for some of the athletes, it's helped them heal from trauma.
There you go, sliding headfirst down a narrow, icy track, navigating twists and turns at speeds of up to 100 kilometers an hour. Team Canada's Teresa Weidemeyer says skeleton racing is exhilarating.
There's nothing else like it.
Born and raised in Coquitlam, Weidemeyer grew up skiing in BC's East Kootenays. Enlisting at the young age of 16, she worked until she was 21. After she left the military, she battled with PTSD, which she says stems from years of sexual violence while serving.
I had a number of fairly traumatic incidents through my 6-year career.
In December 2023, StatsCan found the percentage of military members who reported being sexually assaulted by another soldier more than doubled between 2018 and 2022. Officials at the time saying the spike could be because more people are reporting allegations. Last March, Canada's Defence Minister introduced new legislation to remove the Canadian military's jurisdiction to investigate sexual misconduct at a time when women made up about 16% of Canadian armed forces. Weidemeyer doesn't consider herself a survivor, but rather a warrior. And for her, the Games have been an important part of her healing journey and recovery.
For my moments in service, they were all aggressive, inappropriate men. And having a team of 56 men and women, but most particularly the men, and how gentle and kind-natured is such an encouraging moment.
The Games also serving as a platform for athletes to bring mental health issues into the open.
People who have served together from other countries get to reconnect. They get to find out that there are people going through the same things that they are. There are so many invisible injuries here, people who have had PTSD or other mental issues because of their service. They get a chance to talk about that with others.
A sense of camaraderie, Weidemeyer says she will forever cherish.
I have made it off the plane for the Invictus Games, and that has already made me a winner in the eyes of my family and in my own heart.
As she joins her brothers and sisters in arms, representing Canada at the Games. Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
The Vancouver Island marmot is one of the most critically endangered mammals in Canada. Thanks to conservation efforts, though, they now number 300, up from just 30.
That is quite the recovery. Researchers on the island are studying how their body weight affects survival and have come up with a smart scale to weigh the marmots.
What we've been doing is trying to build a weigh scale which is positioned outside a burrow, for instance, where the marmots can climb on top. And marmots, just by their very nature, like to perch on top of things. And having reliable weight data is gold for the researcher. Body weight is a really good indicator of the health of individual marmots, but it's also, if we can see how best to help them with body condition, especially the females. If a female has good body condition, it means she might be able to have more pups. And even if, say, the average number of pups per female was, say, 3, and we could increase that to 3.2 or 3.3 on average across the population, then that might be the difference between recovering the species or not.
We're not done iterating on this yet. The design process has been a lot of fun, but I think we're probably in for some more prototypes still. The biologists informed us that the marmots were a little bit averse to reflective surfaces or bright white. So one of the earlier revisions that we made to the prototype was to cover the top in wood, scuff up the aluminum, make it less shiny, and hopefully a little bit more appealing to the marmots.
That sucker's posing, you can tell.
Marmots are so cute.
They are.
And a 900% population increase.
That's a good sign.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Good stuff. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, YouTube, and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.